You mentioned some of those coalitions. Trump chipped away at coalitions that had long been part of the Democratic Party. We're talking voters of color, young voters, the working class. What went wrong and how do you win those people back? Governor O'Malley, I'll start with you.
Well, we have to reassert our commitment as a party to the economic security of every man, woman, and child in America. We got away from that. That's why people felt, you know what the common denominator was in all of the groups? It was if they were feeling the pinch of an economy where inflation was going up faster than their paychecks. And so that's what we need to get back to. That's the unifying theme. But that alone is not enough. We have to meet people where they are at. We have to meet people online. We have to greatly up our games in terms of digital communications so that we can find people on those communities where they're getting their news and getting their information online. All of these things begin, however, with a recommitment to that economic message. Donald Trump is going to do so many things in the course of this year that will allow us an opportunity to connect those dots back to the best interests of people in their kitchen tables all over America. And we need to get up on our toes. We need to get ready for this fight. And I wasn't allowed to answer one of the questions about the news coverage and primaries. We have to assert in the next elections, the next presidential elections, we have to grow a backbone as a party and no longer allow the entertainment industrial complex to assign time in contested primaries. Whatever happened to equal time in the Democratic Party primaries? It flew out the window. It flew out the window in the Republican parties as well. In 2016, Donald Trump was given like 30% of the time in the very first debate. And then when they made the polls go up, the rating agency said, wow, this is great for soap and selling cars. We're going to give them 50% next time. As a party, we need to have competitive primaries. We need to have equal time, and we need to take back our party from the entertainment world.
Governor O'Malley, thank you so much. Chair Martin, is the problem just us in the media, or do Democrats need to think differently in order to gain some of these voters' trust back?
It's not just the media, but there is a larger challenge here for sure. And let me just start by just quoting my former boss and mentor, Paul Wellstone, who used to say, we all do better when we all do better. And I believe that should be the slogan of the Democratic Party, that no matter where you are from, no matter where you live, no matter who you love, or no matter who you are, we are going to fight for you. You see, too many people who are part of our coalition have left this party, as you mentioned. Right? Latino voters, of course, women, young voters, rural voters, working class households. We have to figure out the how and why people left us before we come up with the solution. But let me challenge us to think about this as a party. And this is where many of us agree on this stage. What unites a corn farmer in southern Minnesota with a steel worker on the Iron Range in northern Minnesota, with a new refugee in the Twin Cities? Right? It's their belief in the American dream, their belief that if they work hard and play by the rules, they should be able to climb the economic ladder. Yet for so many of those communities, those disparate communities in our big tent party, they feel like they're being left behind, that they cannot achieve that American dream, that they can't climb that economic ladder. They've been voting for the Democratic Party for so long and hoping that we will deliver on that promise of improving their lives, and they're disillusioned. Part of the challenge right now is the disillusionment of big parts of our base who don't feel like we're standing up and fighting hard enough, focusing on the one thing that unites all of them is economics. We need to get back to a working class agenda that gives people hope that their better days are ahead of them, and that their party that they've supported for so long is going to stand with them in the fight to make sure that they can get ahead, not just get by.
Thank you, Chair Martin. Mr. Snyder, same question to you. What went wrong for Democrats with these key coalitions, and how do you get them back?
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is we did see massive vote share losses where we had healthy unions and healthy democratic infrastructure. I think this issue goes back further than just November. But I think one of the things we need to look at is also accountability. So being a young organizer in upstate New York, I would go and I would organize workers to form their union. Many times I would go to Albany and I would ask lawmakers for help. Many times I was turned away and said, hey, kid, you know what? Come back when you've won. or even if you haven't, don't come back. And so there needs to be a level of accountability with the DNC and recruitment of candidates, current candidates as well. If you say you're going to stand with working people, then you need to stand with working people. Bottom line. Another thing that goes into this as well is we need to reimagine our politics as well. Being also a campaign professional as well is there are many times, and we all know this who've worked and organized. Yes, we look at spreadsheets, and yes, maybe we've become too good at winning spreadsheets, but not necessarily winning voters. We already silo people into different columns. We already separate them. And what we need to do in regards to working families is come with that overarching message of upward mobility, making sure that we're showing up in the fight. And that's a big thing, also showing up. We're in Michigan. I know they're having fights right now in Lansing to try and push legislation at the 11th hour. They have the advantage of the governor's office and both houses. And yet, still, they are running into issues when literally members are not showing up to vote. And what does that say to working people? That says that you're not doing your job. That says you're not fighting for me. And so we, again, accountability, showing up, meaning it, candidate recruitment, and then also sticking true to our values. Because if we don't, then we're just not going to be able to reimagine this coalition, rebuild, and then build the trust that has been lost.
Mr. Snyder, thank you. I want to talk about men. Men ran to the right in record numbers in this election. Why are men turned off by the Democratic Party? And I want to start with you, Dr. Hathaway, because I know you've talked specifically about the Democratic Party's relationship with black men.
America is becoming blacker, browner, redder, yellower, and less white, period. And the most loyal constituency and voting bloc of the Democratic Party is African-American women and African-American men. Their interests must be spoken to by not just the candidates that are present at this table, but us as a party holistically. 92% approximately of African-American women voted for the vice president in this last election. 80% of African-American men voted for the vice president in this last election. 47% of Hispanics voted for the opposition, because I just simply choose not to say his name. As we build upon this strategy and look at, as we go out into rural, white, Republican America, because that's been said across many forums, we have to be prepared for the opposition party to come into the urban centers of this country and to compete with us for our voters, period. Because they have a strategy that is long range. We are going to have a strategy that is long range, committed to educating the citizenry of this country about what civic engagement is, about what politics are, because there is a gap that exists of information that people simply don't know what is happening in their state legislatures, what is happening in their city councils and on their board of directors, let alone what is happening in the halls of Congress. So there has to be an education piece. When it comes to us losing men, we also must recognize, and I'm probably running out of time, but we have to recognize that American history is at place.
Dr. Hathaway,
that patriarchy is at place, even in our politics.
Ms. Williamson, same question to you. What to do about men and the Democratic Party?
I remember when the left had a spine. I remember when we didn't seem to have a soft underbelly. I think part of the attraction to Donald Trump is he says what he wants and he makes it happen. I've talked about a raising of a minimum wage. That should be so core to the Democratic Party. It is now $7.25 an hour. President Biden raised it for federal workers to $15 an hour. Then he tried to put it in the COVID relief bill. And you know what stopped him? The parliamentarian. The parliamentarian is unelected, and I assure you, no Republican president would let himself be stopped by the parliamentarian. There are too many ways in which we'll say, oh, we believe in the PRO Act. We just won't spend any political capital on it. Oh, we believe in justice between Israel and Palestine, but we're going to spend all those decades not saying anything, even though we know things must be said. There are too many ways in which the Democratic Party has just so tried to have it both ways. We want to help people, but we became a party that we would only help until the point where to go any further meant that we would be offending our donor class. Yes, our billionaires. And I don't believe, one of the questions asked here tonight was, do we do the right thing or do we try to win? I'm sorry, call me old fashioned. I think you do the right thing, and that's when you win in life. The moral core. We need the moral core of the Democratic Party back in terms of our dedication to people, our unequivocal dedication to people. All this conversation about money, Hillary Clinton had so much more money than Trump did. And we've all heard the stories about how Kamala Harris, the expenditures were so absurd. The gold in America and the world today in the 21st century is human relationships. And no, we're not going to win just by fighting. I'm sorry. We already lost the fight. We're going to win by exciting people. We're going to win by inspiring people. We're going to win by building deep human relationships.
Ms. Williamson,
by doing
thank you
what
so
we
much.
say. That's what's going to make the Democratic Party.
You've all mentioned inauguration is on Monday. Democrats, of course, have to think about the future of the party, but also in the now, how you handle Trump. So what is your school of thought on how to oppose Trump's agenda, and to what extent? Mr. Paul, I'll start with you.
This is a really simple one. You fix it. Donald Trump has promised to fix everything. He always promises to fix everything. He hasn't, in his 4 years, he didn't really fix anything. A lot of the time, Democrats in Congress bailed him out and let the government function because we're good, responsible people and we wanted to see good things happen. And so we let him function. We shouldn't do that anymore. You fix it, Donald Trump. You and your 220 members of the House find a way to pass all the legislation, pass all the things that you want to do, raise the debt ceiling, make the country function. That's your job. As an opposition party, we don't owe you any votes. We don't owe you any responsibility. It is your job to fix the country. And if you can't, well, then that's going to be what happens in this country. You fix it, Donald Trump. That's your job. We're supposed to believe you. Go fix it.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Mr. Wickler, do you agree full opposition, or do you try to find common ground?
I think in this moment, what we look for is when Donald Trump comes for the things that Americans rely on. When they come for Social Security, when they come for our health care, when they come for education, we know that Donald Trump is going to betray his core promise to working people across the country because he's betrayed every promise he's ever made in his entire life. We don't wring our hands about violations of the Hatch Act or this or that norm that he's eroding. We look at what matters to people in their lives, and then we draw the line and we say absolutely not. When we fight on the things that people actually stay up at night worrying about, then we win trust. When we have those fights in a giant public way, then we show people that we're fighting on their side. There's a reason why unions are historically popular, more popular than they've been in decades, because working people know that unions are fighting for them. And there's a reason why Democrats are not historically popular at this moment. It's because people don't feel like we actually care, that we actually fight, that we actually do the work. And we change that by the way that we show up in these moments. That is how we inspire people. But we don't just do it. We don't just walk the walk, because a lot of Democrats in office, in this work, they do amazing things. They do the right thing. No one ever finds out about it, because most people do not spend every waking moment, as many of us here in this room do, thinking about politics. They have other things going on in their lives. And if you looked at this last election, we won people who pay attention to political news by 8 points and lost people who say they never pay attention to political news by 16 points. And that means that if we want people to know we're fighting for them, we can't just go on MSNBC. We should go there too. We should also go on conservative media, but most critically, we should go to the places where people make sense of the world. That is the fitness blogs and fashion podcasts. That is the places where people thinking about sports and personal financial management, and show everywhere that we're fighting for working folks across race and ethnicity and culture and geography, that we are the party that fights for regular folks against those trying to rig this country for a tiny group of ultra-rich billionaires.
Governor O'Malley, full resistance mode, or are there things you think Democrats should work with Republicans and Trump on?
I believe the narrative arc has to be for the next 2 years to connect for the American people, especially the hardest working people in America, that the actions that Donald Trump is taking is undermining their desire and their hard work to get ahead. I think that has to be the narrative arc. And we are going to be given so many stories, so many things that he's going to break. So yes, and Social Security might be the first one. Allowing prescription drug prices to rise again, the cost of living going up, the instability in the world that will drive up gasoline prices, energy. He says he was going to fix everything, make things better. I agree that we need to hold him accountable for those promises, because people didn't vote for him because they thought he was a good person or they thought he was good for the republic. They voted for him because they were sick and tired of being sick and tired of not being able to get ahead. And he promised them that they would. Shame on us that we could even allow people to reach that conclusion. But now we have to connect it all of the time. We also have to stand firm on our principles, our belief in the dignity of every person, and we have to stand firm for the republic, for our being a country of laws, and nobody should be above the law. Not the president, not anybody else. But the main through line has to be to fight him on the things that people care most about, that their family's economic security depends upon.
Governor O'Malley, thank you. Mr. Snyder.
Well, I think this is where my experience in national security comes into play. What we're talking about is an asymmetrical threat here. So yes, largely not only being the biggest grifter ever, he is a large distraction. He is distracting us from what's happening on the ground. And so we need to really focus on what's happening at the ground level. We're already seeing shenanigans happen in North Carolina, where there are those who are also emboldened by Trump, playing with votes, holding up court confirmations, and that is going to continue to happen. We're also seeing Proud Boys, 3%ers, and Oath Keepers running for offices. Okay, what's going to happen after January the 6ers are pardoned? Okay, they're going to come home. What are they going to do? They're likely going to run. And so while we are focused on Trump, yes, I think it should be a resistance. We need to focus at the local level, because if we don't, and they get their foot in the door in politics at the local level, we all know what happens. If you get elected dog catcher, you keep on moving up. You keep on moving to the city council, and then we're going to be dealing with these folks for years. Not just a cycle or two, but years. And so, yes, we need to resist at the local level. We need to reach everybody. And going back to your question about young men, one of the things that we didn't do is contest that space. Yes, there was a large issue having to do with misogyny, and that's something we need to face. But largely in the spaces that the Republicans made inroads, non-traditional outlets, at reaching out at machine speed, we didn't have an answer. And so that's one of the things that we also need to look at, and also look asymmetrically. Fight with digital information, build those relationships, build analytical centers, and then yes, resist when we need to, but we can't lose sight at that local level where we're going to be facing a much, much bigger threat.
Mr. Snyder, thank you. Eugene, I'll throw it to you.
Thank you. We want to get into what the next year really has the most power on, and we've kind of dabbled around a little bit, the future of the party. The Democratic Party has, over the last decade, been largely defined by opposition to Donald Trump. But as you guys have talked about, that can't be the only defining characteristic of being a Democrat. I would like to start with Mr. Paul. What are the animating beliefs of the party? Give me a simple distillation of what it means to be a Democrat in 2025.
So Democrats want everyone's lives to be better, and they will do that by being communitarian. That is what it means to be a Democrat. We want everyone in the country's lives to be better, and if that means that we have to take some from the wealthiest, then we do that. If that means that we have to do public health measures to keep people safe, then we do that. If that means that we acknowledge the history in our country of people suffering under unfair systems, we do that. And if we do those things that happen to make everyone's lives better, then we have the ability to be Democrats and be proud of being Democrats. That's why I do this. I do this work. I've always done this work because I believe that when Democrats win, people's lives are better. I think the data bears that out. And I'm proud of that. And I don't think it's hard, and I don't think it's difficult. And I think sort of running around being afraid and acting like that's not true is a huge problem that we have, because there's been a lot of the stage of apologizing for we didn't do this and we didn't do that, and we didn't care about these people and we didn't care about those people. And I think that at least in our policies under President Biden, we cared about all of those people. If there are issues where people are unhappy with him, I understand that, particularly with respect to the Middle East. But generally, on the issues that we care about, Joe Biden did a really good job. That we are terrible at communicating that good job, that is a bigger problem that we have, and that's why I'm running in this race. But I don't think being a Democrat is hard. I love being a Democrat.
Thank you. Dr. Hathaway, same question to you.
I want to go back to the previous question as well for just a moment.
I'd love for you to answer my question.
I got you. I promise you I do. Okay. My heart aches for our nation simply for the fact that our fellow countrymen and countrywomen elected a president that is a liar, a felon, a crook, a rapist, and he will be inaugurated on the observation of one of the greatest union organizers, civil rights leaders of all time, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That bothers me. And that also ought to upset and break some other people's hearts as well, that are members of minority groups, black, white, red, brown, yellow, across this country. When it comes to addressing your question, I told you I was going to take care of you. We oftentimes get on offense or defense when it comes to addressing the opposition. I understand it, but we also have to do a better job when it comes to messaging as a party. We can't just always be on defense. We have to project a message, a vision that casts the net wide for as many people as possible to come into our tent and onto our shores. For approximately the last few election cycles, the youth in this country have been underrepresented in our politics. They ought to have a seat, a voice when it comes to politics. And under new leadership, I am telling you all, I'm a school teacher. That's what I do every day. I know the power and potential of the youth. My students inspire me every day. When we draw them in, listen to their viewpoints and their agenda, they will take off with lightning speed. They just need some direction. I think that is indicative of the entire country. I believe that on any given election, we can have sweeping waves of democratic power and policies that mirror the best and greatest of America. We just have to project such.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder, the same question to you. What are the animating beliefs of the Democratic Party in 2025?
In 2025, I think, a lot of this is we got to go back to our core. And again, this goes back to, like I said, redefining our politics, not only just to be more inclusive, but yes, to Dr. Hathaway's point, also being uplifting. I think there's a solid point here in regards to youth. When I talked about previously being ready for that new battlefield, I think we need to uplift youth leaders to take the charge there and drive and also teach us how to navigate that new environment. But I think going back on your question on sort of what is it to be a Democrat? We always, I think, here agree it's to be for the working person, for the little guy. And maybe to get a little poetic, it goes to what's on the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And yet that message has become pretty convoluted. And we've done this again because we look at how are we going to get a win in an election? What do our spreadsheets tell us? Where do we need to get a bailout? Where do we need to go and say, you know what? I need money for the campaign and I need bodies to knock doors. Hey, unions are going to bail us out. Working for unions, working for SEIU, tired of being the ATM machine. There needs to be a level of accountability. It also goes to communities of color. We were talking about, where do we go? Let's talk to the Latino community maybe 3 weeks out. No, that's got to stop. And so how do we bring that back? By going to these communities, rebuilding that trust, showing up, and actually having a conversation, but also more importantly, listening. Once we listen, we'll know and we'll see. It's those issues about putting groceries on the table. It's about education. It's about upward mobility. And the Democratic Party needs to stay true to those ideals. And like I said before, it needs to show up and fight at every single level.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. The Democratic Party often prides itself on being a big tent focused on defending, you've talked about it, protecting vulnerable groups. But there's a school of thought within the party after the election that the focus has come at the expense of losing other constituencies within the party. Governor O'Malley, I want to start with you. How do you balance the two? How do you make sure winning elections doesn't come at the expense of marginalized groups?
Yeah, I am not one of those that subscribes to the theory that we drove voters away because we were always talking about transgender issues. It was those guys that were running those ads. We could debate whether or not we could have been more effective in responding to them. But this we believe as Democrats, that there is dignity in every single person, that there is dignity in work. We believe that we share a common good and that we must help each other if we are to succeed. This is what we believe as Democrats, and that is why our highest priority is the economic security, health, and well-being of every person. You know, Donald Trump's twisted talent is tapping into the fears that we have of tomorrow. That's the twisted talent. Sometimes we've fallen into the trap of trying to scare people more about Trump than Trump already is scaring them about tomorrow. We need to remember that we're the party that tells one another that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. We live in a time of enormous opportunities, the beginnings of the third American century, the dawning of a fast moving into a third industrial revolution, the growing awareness all around the world of a third ethic in the Western mind anyway, and that is the ethic of the earth. In each of these things, there are enormous opportunities to create more jobs, more opportunities, more upward mobility. We've got to cast aside the fear that's over this country and return to our core beliefs. And that is what is going to carry us through.
Thank you, Governor. Mrs. Williamson, same to you.
You said what do we do about the issue of winning elections at the expense of marginalized people?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, I thought we won whatever we've got, mainly because of black women. I don't think we have won elections at the expense of marginalized people. I think marginalized people have put us in office more often than not.
But what about the feeling?
The issue is that our vision statement is the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, and that governments are instituted to secure the rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. That should be our North Star, and the Democratic Party should be the keeper of that story. Every time we do a policy, we should explain it because of its alignment. Why do we stand up for people of color? Why do we stand up for Latinos? Why do we stand up for Jews? Why do we stand up for Hindus? Why do we stand up for Arabs? Why do we stand up for gay people? Why do we stand up for binary? Because all men are created equal. Why do we insist on universal health care? Because it's necessary if you're going to pursue happiness. Why do we insist on tuition-free college and tech school? Because it's necessary if you're going to pursue happiness. Why do we want a clean environment? Because it's necessary if your kids aren't going to have asthma. We need to reconnect the American people to a story. And I want to say something here. We need to, in certain ways, be clear about places where Donald Trump has succeeded. They have a story. They have a cohesive worldview, as abhorrent as it is to us. We have a better story, but we don't claim it. And that's the story of the way people from abolitionists to women's suffragists to civil rights workers to early labor organizers push back against those who, for their own ideological and financial purposes, found the real democratic values of equality of all inconvenient to their purposes. And it's our turn now. It's our turn now, because we have a matrix of corporate powers that represent corporate tyranny, from insurance companies to pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big chemical companies, big agricultural companies, gun manufacturers, big oil and defense contractors. They're coming with their profit motive to supersede democracy and humanitarian values, and the Democratic Party's going to show up for the people.
Last night, President Biden said in his farewell speech to the nation, quote, "Today an oligarchy is taking shape in an America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy." He added, "A dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a few ultra-wealthy people with dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked." Chair Martin, do you want the money of the folks that he's talking about if you're chair of the Democratic Party, of these tech executives, or would you bar any contributions from tech? If so, Why would you want to fund your party from the people your president calls a threat to the democracy?
Let me say what I said earlier. It's important for our party to raise money, for sure, but not at the expense of our values. And as the next DNC chair, and I'm sure many on the stage would agree, that we have to make sure that we're fundraising in a way that reflects our values as a party and allows us to raise the resources we need to compete, of course. But let me just say this. There are a number of billionaires in this country that have no interest in helping the working class in this country. The idea of an oligarchy, the idea of the billionaire class and others essentially ruling this country, the president's absolutely right. We are heading down a path that we haven't seen ever. And we have to, as a party, stand up and fight back. And part of that right now means that we have to be very clear who we are. Whose side are we on? Are we on the side of our donors, right? Or are we on the side of the people that are leaving our party because they don't feel like we're fighting for them? So if we want people to trust us, they got to feel like we're on their side. So it's really important that we focus on a working class agenda, as I mentioned, that give people a sense we're going to fight for them, and we're not taking money for people who are actually working against them. And as the next DNC chair, I'll make sure we're not taking money from people who are trying to put people down and to go against the working class in this country. We will not take money from people that do not share our values as a Democratic Party.
Chair Martin, in 30 seconds, who are the kind of folks that you're talking about? Because it sounds really good, but specifically, who are the types of folks that you will bar from giving money to the Democratic Party?
Well, there's lots of billionaires I wouldn't take money from. Elon Musk is one of them, right? There's a lot of tech, this tech industrial complex that President Biden was talking about, and others. There are a lot of donors there who are clearly working against the interest of working class people that I would not take money from. There's too many to name. That's the problem in this country right now, right? The top 1% in this country who control so much of the wealth, right? Who are lording over this country right now, we shouldn't be taking their money. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of good billionaires out there that have been with Democrats who share our values, and we will take their money. But we're not taking money from those bad billionaires.
Thank you, Chair Martin. So a list of good and bad billionaires at the DNC. Chair Wickler, same question to you.
We're not going to take money from people that are actively union busting. We're not going to take money from the people that funded Stop the Steal and tried to topple our democracy. If they try to donate, we're going to send that money right back because it says something about who we are. And that's a pretty easy commitment for us to make. What we will do is fight back against the Republicans who try to tell working folks that because Democrats care about someone other than them, that Democrats can't be for all working people. And that's been the con that Republicans have used. They try to divide people so they can rip us all off. They try to divide us based on gender and gender identity and our sexuality. They try to divide us based on race and ethnicity so they can pick the pockets of working people across the country. They tried this in Wisconsin. And in this election, we saw Republican turnout go up everywhere. In our states around Wisconsin and our neighboring states, we saw Democratic turnout drop. But in Wisconsin, where they threw all of these attacks, we saw Democratic turnout rise in this last election. And that rose because we organized everywhere year round, not just in the final stretch, because we communicated on every platform across every community. Milwaukee had the highest turnout of the 50 biggest cities in the country in this election. And we added votes for Harris in rural areas, most rural counties across Wisconsin, because we did that year round. We do that when we show our values. That's how Tammy Baldwin got back to the U.S. Senate despite those hideous divisive ads from the right. That's how we flipped 14 state legislative seats, even as our neighboring seats lost Democratic state legislative seats. And we can win when we show people that we are fighting on their side, and we don't just show up at the last second, and we don't just trust traditional media to get the word out to people who hate politics and don't trust politicians. When we show up in the places where people make sense of their world, we can actually win their trust and earn their votes. And that means that we use money to win trust by actually showing up and fighting for the things that matter to working people across this country. That's what the DNC is going to do. That's why I'm running for DNC chair.
Thank you, Chair Wickler. Really quickly, a show of hands from the others, a blanket ban on tech execs as chair of the Democratic Party. Contributions. All right. I want to get to a question for all of you about one of the real powers of the DNC, which is setting the nominating calendar for 2028. Simply put, what is the best way for the party to organize the early states? And quickly, if you could, as you know, we're running out of time. Governor O'Malley, I want to start with you.
Yes, I believe that we have to have an open and transparent process about the calendar. It's certainly an issue that lots of people care about. I think ideally we want early states that represent the great diversity of our country, and that should be our goal. So the key to all of this is to make sure that in the ordering of the calendar, we also have fair debates with equal time, that the states are of sufficient size so that candidates can actually have the time to meet voters and greet voters, and the voters can have the opportunity to ask the questions. But the party needs to figure this out in an open and transparent process.
Mr. Paul, early states, what is the best way for the party to organize early states? And please name names.
Absolutely. So New Hampshire's going to go first because their state law says they're going to go first, and they're just going to do that no matter what we say. Let them go first. Let them go first in December. And then I want a month later staggered primaries, one a week in states that are mid-sized, my native Connecticut, Iowa, Mississippi, Oklahoma, so you can get in to the states that have small numbers of voters, but not so small that it's tiny. And then, so that will give the whole country a chance to weigh in, Nevada also, weigh in in a way that then allows for deliberation, because one of the major problems in our last primary process in 20 was Joe Biden won a race on Saturday and then was chosen without doubt on a Tuesday because that was the day after it. And there was no chance to have anything else happen. We want to stagger small primary states because if we do that, we have an opportunity to be deliberative, but it can't just be the white states like Iowa and New Hampshire again. But again, New Hampshire is going to go first no matter what we do because of their state law. Sanctioning them doesn't work. We tried it. It didn't work. It's never going to work. Let them go first.
So, Mr. Paul, really quickly, there should be no penalty for flouting the rules that the DNC sets for their calendar.
What possible penalty are we ever going to impose on them?
You would be the chair, sir.
No, so I strip away all of their delegates. They get no delegates. New Hampshire, as part of their economy and history of being the first primary, they don't care who gets sent to the convention for delegates. And the number of time delegates actually end up mattering is so small that trying to sanction them, the party in 8 tried to sanction Florida and Michigan, and we caved on that too to some degree in the end. Sanctioning doesn't work. We want to think it's going to work. It doesn't work. And New Hampshire, it's certainly not going to work because they consider it to be their birthright. And they did it again. And did we seat their things? Yes, we did. We sat them again. And even if we didn't, they would have taken the penalty to prove how noble they are. Let them go in December.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Thank you. Dr. Hathaway.
As I said before, a true Southern strategy has to go forward for the Democratic Party. It was smart for the current DNC to shift its first primary to South Carolina. They have done the grassroots work, the organizing and mobilizing work in the African-American community, as well as other marginalized, vulnerable groups, in order to bring more people to the table. We have to begin to treat each day like it's election day. Mass voter registration, mass mobilization, social activation each and every day in order for us to rebuild and strengthen this party. What that looks like is us going immediately into the South. If Iowa is going to be the first caucus, then we ought to retain South Carolina as the first primary and sweep across the South in an intentional, deliberative manner to win back the South. Then we can work on a calendar. The executive committee, all those involved with the DNC, the Democratic leadership overall, will work together in order to formulate the calendar for the rest of the states. And we ought not wait until Super Tuesday to determine where the wave is going for our presidential candidates. We have to do the hard work now to prepare, vet an individual or individuals that will be representative for the 2028 election, as well as consider the most recent vice president to be a candidate for the 2028 presidential election.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder.
I think I may be the only candidate who's worked all 4 states during the presidential cycle during early contests. And I think one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning, we need to have mission dictate process here, okay? Because we need to start winning again. Traditions are important, but if that's getting in the way of actually setting things up for a general election win, I think we need to have a real strong talk and reevaluate things. Because as being an organizer on the ground, for all of those states in those early contests, it brought the attention, it brought the media, it brought the funding, it got the excitement going, and ultimately it helped build the infrastructure. In many cases, that was responsible for either winning or bringing a very, very hard fight during the general election. That's what those early contests do. And so, yes, things need to be more diverse. I think it would make sense, in my point of view, to relook at the map, look to where we need that new infrastructure built, have a hard conversation. And yes, there needs to be a level of accountability if people are going to step outside the lines. I'm going to take this a little bit further too. We're talking about working people and access and the ability to get engaged and get involved and have their voices heard. I believe we just need to have primaries. I've been through caucuses before. Again, I know it comes down to tradition, but working people don't have the time to spend a whole half day in a gymnasium or a casino floor. It needs to be open. It needs to drive worker participation. And I think we need to look at these equations also when we're looking at the map moving forward.
Thank you. Chair Martin.
Yeah. Look, if the Rules and Bylaws Committee revisits this, the first thing is no one in our party should have their thumb on the scale. It should be an open and transparent process that essentially ensures that every state who wants to be heard in this process, much like the last time, has an opportunity to make a bid and make their case. And if the RBC chooses to change the calendar, there should be just one guiding principle that guides that. Whatever calendar is set has to not only reflect the traditions and the diversity of our party, but it also has to make sure it's rigorous, efficient, and fair, and it battle tests our nominees so we can win. At the end of the day, the primary is about making sure we come out with the strongest candidate who's in the best position to win the election. And that's what should guide the conversation. Reflecting our great traditions and diversity, rigorous, efficient, and fair, battle testing our nominee.
So as chair, would you have an opinion on who should go first?
Here's what I would say. It's up to the Rules and Bylaws Committee and the DNC itself and all of our stakeholders to weigh in on that conversation. And it's important that the next chair be open to all those conversations and be ready to have the conversation in a way that doesn't appear that one person or one state or one candidate or one campaign is driving that process. And that's what I'm committed to.
Ms. Williamson.
I'm the only person up here who has actually run in presidential primaries. And I can tell you.
Governor O'Malley ran in 2016.
O'Malley. 10-second rebuttal.
Governor O'Malley ran in 2016.
It's 5 seconds now.
10 seconds, yes. I ran in all 4 of those too.
Yeah.
So,
This year,
and if
you
time had
ran
been
this year.
allocated
Okay.
equally in those debates, we might have spared ourselves Donald Trump for these last 8
Thank you,
years.
Governor O'Malley.
I apologize.
Williamson.
I am the only one who ran this year. And I can assure you that this conversation about a calendar is a complete deflection from the dirty underbelly of what really goes on in presidential primaries, what went on in 2024. This wasn't about the calendar. I know there's the racial diversity in South Carolina. There's also economic diversity in New Hampshire. States should not be pitted against each other in this primary process. The real problem goes back to the money. And by the way, I want to point out that the DNC, the Democratic Party, started taking all this corporate and big money in the late 70s. And that's when our moral authority started dripping away. Mr. Reid Hoffman, recognized here as the good billionaire because he's ours, he shares our values. He gave $2 million to the write-in campaign for Joe Biden in New Hampshire this year, while the rest of us are scrambling for our $3,300 maximum donations. Most people do not realize that the way these things happen is that the secretaries of state say to the head of the Democratic Party who's on the ballot. And people who had tried so hard, such as myself, such as Dean Phillips, et cetera, what happened was that in quite a few states in this country, the Democratic Party chairman said, Joe Biden, And the people said, the secretaries of state said, well, what about that woman, Marianne Williamson or Dean Phillips? And he said, oh, nothing to see there, nothing to see there. It was the state of Massachusetts that overrode that. And the Secretary of the Commonwealth put me back on that calendar. So let's not, if I am the chair of the DNC, it's going to be about the ethics. It's not going to be about the calendar. It's going to be about the ethics. And every state party chair will know none of that shenanigan. We don't do that anymore. Those are the old days. And yes, we do have to clean up the past. We have to take in how much of our failure came from this, because the American people saw that. The American people didn't like it. And I do believe it's part of why we lost.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. In 30 seconds, though, the calendar is a vital part. Setting the calendar is a vital part of the job of the DNC, and you as chair would be a part of that process. It seems like there should not just the feelings of how people feel about the situation, but also the actual. I know
how strongly Iowa felt when then they were gone, and I know how strongly South Carolina felt. I know how strongly New Hampshire felt, and all the states matter. And it's, once again, making it all about the calendar of who goes first. Everyone matters. It's what's happening that matters. And that calendar conversation is used as a deflection so people won't notice what's really going down with people being put off ballots and so forth. I just want to be fair to all the states. Every American matters. That should be our creed. And we shouldn't have states feeling like they have to be competing with other states.
Thank you very much. Chair Wickler, you're last on this question here.
I agree that fundamentally we should hear DNC members' voices. We should hear from each of the states. We should have a process that honors our traditions, our coalition, the diversity of our party, that ensures that we battle test our candidates and that we choose a process that brings us a winning presidential nominee. The DNC should not have its thumb on the scale. We should give every candidate a fair shot, and we should make sure that as we go forward after the primary, everyone knows that we have picked the strongest candidate and then unite around that person to be able to fight and win. It's a pretty simple commitment, and I think it's one that we need to honor as we do this work. And in the process to get there, we need to become a supercharged party that has built the on-the-ground capacity around the country for the next presidential nominee. Because by the time this primary is over, if we've not done that work for the next 4 years, it will be too late. What we've done in Wisconsin is to build a presidential scale campaign before we have the nominee. Before we have the nominee in 2020, we had hundreds of organizers in our state party organizing and communicating across Wisconsin, and then we never shut it down. For the last 4 years, we've had the biggest on-the-ground, year-round organizing program of any state. We've had the biggest communications operation, social media footprint of any Democratic state party. We have kept going, and that's how we've won race after race in a state that was rigged for total GOP control. And that to me is the question in this DNC chair's race. We're going to have a presidential race in 4 years, but what do we do between now and then? And that's why I think we need a chair who comes from a purple state that was rigged to be red, not a blue state where we've won every election for years going back before the current chair. We need it in a state where we were on the ropes and we fought back year after year. We've won year after year. We've unrigged the state, and now we're poised to win a Democratic trifecta. That's Wisconsin. That's the kind of candidate that I am in this race. And I think the Republicans are going to try to rig the country, and we're going to need a fighting party that is ready to unrig it so that we can win in 4 years and beyond.
Thank you, Chair Wickler. Thank you. I want to thank the candidates for a lively discussion. We are at the end of our forum. Unless everyone wants to stay here for another 4 hours, we could do it. We're excited and ready to go. We'll now hear from each of you for 30 seconds with closing remarks. We'll start with Mr. Paul.
So I got my start in Connecticut with Bill Curry's campaign for governor. Bill Curry told everyone that Governor Rowland was a crook. He was a crook. The media shrugged. We lost, and I never trusted you again. All my plans are necessary because everyone is tuned out the mainstream media. And when we do hear you, you only ask gotcha questions. 80% of the questions you asked tonight were, why are you terrible? So we have to go around you, whatever it costs. Read my plans, listen to my plans. We can only do this together.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Ms. Williamson.
A lot of these questions are interesting discussions, but they would be really boring to the average American. The average American doesn't care about this inside baseball stuff. The average American cares about the fact that they need health care. The average American needs education. The average American needs a safer environment and safer food supply. We need to be excitement and we need to be inspiration. We need to be an incubator for things that are really meaningful in people's lives. And that's what I feel that I've done for the last 40 years. I've talked to people about what's really going on with them. And we need a leader of the DNC who
Williamson,
can
thank you.
use all this talent,
Ms.
but use it
Williamson,
mainly
thank
to
you.
inspire the American people.
Thank you. Chair Martin.
Well, thank you to all of you for moderating this, and thanks to everyone for being in this room tonight, and to everyone watching at home. Look, my father-in-law is 85 years old. He farms 800 acres of corn and beans and 400 head of beef cattle in southern Minnesota. He voted for Obama both times and then Trump all of these last 3 times. And when I asked him why, he talked about nobody wanting to come home and farm the land. He talked about driving his wife with Parkinson's 50 miles to find health care. He's got a knot of anxiety in his gut, and he doesn't feel like anyone cares and people have forgotten about him.
Chair Martin, thank you.
That's why I'm running for DNC, to make sure people like Dave O'Rourke know he's not forgotten, and we're going to fight for him in his
Chair
life.
Martin, thank you. Thank you. Chair Wickler. Chair Wickler. Chair Wickler.
We're all here because we love this country and we love this party. And we have a choice to make about whether we're going to choose a safe pair of hands and run the party like we're in a blue state and hope people come back to us, or whether we're going to go with a chair who has a record of supercharging a party in a hostile environment, of getting hundreds of thousands of people involved who never thought they'd get involved in a party before, of building a party that can organize and fight and win back trust up and down the ballot for the next 4 years. I'm asking for your vote so we can build that party because our country needs it now.
Thank you, Chair Wickler. Mr. Snyder. Mr. Snyder.
Thank you. Going back to my national security background, we need to learn from our failures and have real tough conversations. That's the only way that we can ascend. So I'm in here to solve a problem. I'm not here to win a job. And so I am taking that approach on this and looking at it with the sheer most seriousness of what is coming our way. And that comes with rebuilding trust, not only with DNC members and uplifting them, uplifting young voters, uplifting the communities that have been overlooked and taken for granted, because if we don't, the other side is going to target them and is going to go after them, and then we're going to be in some real trouble.
Thank you. Dr. Hathaway.
I'd like to urge the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic Party and all those that love this country, the youth of this land, that we are about to experience a new burst of freedom and a spirit of excellence, for we can arouse this nation to form a more perfect union and to use our most powerful instrument, the ballot. That is how we redeem the soul of America. That is how we establish a moral imagination and produce transformation. Through the ballot, we can make real the promises of democracy and walk down the sunlit path of economic, racial, and social justice.
Thank you, Dr. Hathaway. Governor O'Malley, last to you.
This is a critical time in our country's history, and I want to thank all 3 of you for being serious journalists and for being here with us. We need you. What our party needs right now is not a caretaker. What we don't need is continuity. We need a change maker. We need a fighter. And we need to fight like the Republic hangs in the balance of our making the changes we need to win. If you're up for it, together, I will lead us out of this darkness to win back the House and to win back races all across America. Let's get up for greatness.
Thank you, Governor O'Malley. All right, everyone. Thank you to those on the stage for engaging with us, with each other, with our audience, with the American people. Thank you to those in the audience for your energy tonight. This stuff is important. This matters. You matter. Thank you, everyone.